Good morning, everybody. My name is Yandeh Sallah-Muhammed. I am from the Gambia and based between Gambia and Senegal. So today we are going to be talking about marine conservation, communications in crisis and conflict. And what does that mean? I want to speak in the Gambian context, and then my partner panelists will speak more in depth with case studies. Yes? So, also, I like to do trigger warnings. There will be a dolphin carcass at some point in the presentation if it's not comfortable for you, just so you know it's happening. Right. So I come from the Gambia, West Africa, as many of you know. I think since our commonality is marine conservation, that you've heard a lot about overfishing, overexploitation of our waters. Whereas my country is quite small with 1.2 billion people normally. Now we're having a lot of uprisings of violence in the country due to the lack of natural resources, but not just natural resources in terms of deforestation, but actually affecting people's stomachs because you don't have fish of appropriate size to eat. So there's conflicts going on. And on top of that, we also have an influx of migration from fishermen from Senegal. If you know about Gambia, we're completely surrounded by Senegal except for one seaside coast. So a lot of our seaside is exploited by Senegalese fishermen. With this problem, we have the issue now of the lack of fish causing violence between Gambian fishermen and Senegalese fishermen, which was not a problem before. Also, I'm not sure if you know about the fish meal issues in West Africa, but there are huge issues of both Gambian and Senegalese fishermen taking whatever small fish that we do have and selling it to Chinese fish meal factories, therefore leaving us to buy back our own fish, as well as causing health issues from toxifying our waters. So, lots of incoming violence from these situations, and now there's deaths happening where there are actual physical conflicts of violence, people sneaking into each other's houses and murdering each other. So what was more of a, oh, what are we going to do issue is now becoming more of a people are dying, getting arrested, and then strikes happening within the country. Last year in April, there was this fatal stabbing. A Senegalese man snuck into a Gambian's house. They're both fishermen, and he stabbed him. It's not quite clear what the situation was, but from that there was a huge uproar of the fishermen in the village of Sanyang, like lighting everything on fire, so the Senegalese fishermen fled for a few months to a different village. So, as marine conservation communications people, what do we do in these kind of situations, right? Where people's lives are on the line, people don't have food to eat. Where do we stand, especially as people that come from the area, what do we do in these cases, right? So what's important is for us to not only work as communicators, but also have a mindset shift. As I say here, you are also an advocate within your community. You are a marketer as well as a mediator. Personally, within GMECI, my organization, we have a working group to help to develop the capacity for active citizens within communities. So from here, you can see one of our working group managers, Mustafa, he's training some high school students on being active citizens and helping with mediation and capacity building training for being able to communicate within their own neighborhoods, to be able to, when these situations happen, be able to handle reporting and sharing this information with us to come and offer that support. Also, for these type of situations, it's very time sensitive. I think a big topic that we've been touching on is about confidence in scientists. I think also confidence in communicators. When we are presented with these kind of conflicts, how fast do we act? Do we take a week to decide, let's get this information, how do we process it? Or do we just go with what we know and opinions? Do we stay biased or unbiased? And where do we stand as, for example, a person coming from this community, seeing what's going on, where do we stand? Because we have all the facts presented to us about how much fish is available, how much is sustainable within our waters, and at this point, it is unsustainable. So the science is already there, and people are still acting in an unsustainable way. What do we do when everyone already knows what's right and what's wrong, and people will still do the same? So a big thing that we like to focus on is our similarities. In Gambia, we have 9 major ethnic groups with completely different languages. So there's already this issue of a language barrier, but most of the time we can communicate between each other in English or French. But there are, of course, the binding connections where we share the same sea, the same river that passes through the entire river Gambia, as the Gambia is named after. So we try to use this as a connection and for looking forward to the future about what we want for our country. Even though we don't have fish, what does a new reality look like, and how can we share what type of opportunities can come from these new realities? How can we also use the facts and science to support these goals, even though, again, in Gambia, everybody is very clear on the fact that the acts that we have now for fisheries is unsustainable, that it is, sorry to say this, a very, very corrupt industry in West Africa in general. You never know whose money is going in whose pockets and why we can't find any solutions that everyone can agree on. But we can always step back and be supported by the science and how do we disseminate this information through the right channels. Because we talked in one session about being able to provide information, but then we talked about people don't have printers to even receive this information. In the Gambia, we don't really use a written language. We use spoken word. We don't have anything for writing, and if you write in Arabic. So from there already, you have a gap of like, how do we process this information for people to access? So a lot of the time within our organization, we have similar interventions like I showed in the past slide, where we actually have to do in-person, go to the site and do in-person training for communication as far as capacity building, as far as well taking photos and videos with the community. And yes, who can we use to engage as stakeholders to instill confidence from the community towards science? This is the same, like we take a big step to invest in the students, children, as well, to develop this capacity to understand that we are scientists, we're willing to help you, we're willing to teach you, and we're also learning from each other. It's a give and take type of relationship. It's not just us saying, this is what's right and this is what you should do, but also what's your reality and how can we help to support you? What tools can we give you? What resources can we give you? It's not just like take, take, take. And trust, we all want to trust each other as humans, I hope. So also the similarity of the need to trust, the need to care, the need to love between each other, we really try to pull on this similarity. Another important part is local ties and lines. So when you are actually facing a crisis as a science communicator, what do you do when you have to give this information out? So we always try to make sure that we have a baseline foundation framework for when we do need to disseminate information in emergencies. As you can see here, we have, this is very cool, amazing filmmaker, Mercy from Zimbabwe, who came to train some of the girls that we work with. We work with a women's solar engineering development center that works with women who dropped out of school to become solar technicians. And Mercy is teaching them how to tell their own stories. They live in a major fishing village in Khartoum, further to the east of the country. So she's teaching them how to make documentaries from their cell phones about the current situation in the Gambia with illegal fishing and overexploitation of fishing. So when we don't have this information available to everyone, we also offer free tools online. So we have an awareness to action training, which is a free PDF that you can download. So if you're not able to come to these trainings, you're able to get this information. We always offer like a little a worksheet that people can download and use. But again, we also have this issue of, great, you have a PDF, but maybe you don't have internet or a phone to read it or a printer to print it out, or, you know, but we try to do the best we can, and we try to offer these resources for free to develop this capacity to share this information with the science to the community, and the community to share us the resources that they have as well. Like I said as well, not only is it very important to develop the capacity to be able to report on these things, but not to wait until there is actually a crisis to then be like, oh, how do we communicate it? So we always try to use different campaigns throughout the year on different things. It doesn't have to be something very major, but something as small as this was, we had a Keep Gambia Clean campaign, because we've had 22 years of dictatorship where it was mandatory to clean the streets in the country once a month. And now that's changed, since we have a democracy now, where this democracy did not pass this amazing idea and concept on. So now we have this Keep Gambia Clean, Clean Green Gambia campaign, where we invite different students from different schools to share this information. So we already have this network where we're teaching children of all ages from primary to secondary about basic campaigning and information. So in case of emergencies where things happen, we already have some routes to take. We also work with the university students for fieldwork sessions, because we also have a field school with GMECI. So we normally have 2 to 3 day sessions where they can come in and learn about different tools and resources they can use to report on crises in their community as well. Trigger warning, dolphin carcasses coming in. Okay, I don't like to see dead things without being prepped, so I like to prep people for this. We talked a lot about misinformation in the past days, and this is a very clear example. And I like to say, stand for nothing or you fall for anything. This was a photo that was circulating in the Gambia. It's not in the Gambia, but people were saying there was a massive dolphin stranding. So what do you do? And people are already starting to post this online and saying, this is what's happening in the country. There is illegal, like creating the most amazing stories. And so what do you do when you have these instances where you have these dolphin things? Or whales, or we have a lot of strandings, not an abnormal amount. We have dolphin strandings, people have dolphin strandings. But and we also have overturned fishing boats that drop massive amounts of fish onto the beaches. And then people will say, it's the Chinese and they're poisoning the waters and all the fish are showing up dead. You know, like situations and photos like this that start to circulate, which are just simply untrue about the source or the reasoning why. So we always try to share, once we see things like this, automatically within our networks of just posting it directly and being like, look, this is what this actually is. Let's not all spiral out of control. And we also have a really good relationship with most people within environmental organizations, because within GMECI, we overlap with high schools, universities, as well as CSOs within the country. So when people see dolphins like this, because we run a dolphin research project, they send us pictures, or if they see live dolphins, they also send us pictures, because we work with the Whale Stranding Network in West Africa. So that's also great that we can get this engagement from people sending us this information to then be able to share with everybody else in the world. So yes, this is like one of our projects with CCHD, which is the Atlantic Humpback Dolphin Project, which is exploring the presence of Atlantic humpback dolphins in 13 West African countries in partnership with GMECI and the Whale Stranding Network. So language and medium are key. What does this mean? So when you're having these crises, how are you sharing this information about what's going on? Are you going to be giving all of the statistics and numbers and percentages and figures that people in general in the Gambia, again, we were talking about this context, will they understand what you're saying? How are you making it relatable? As I said before, we have a different concept of what is literacy. So what we like to do a lot of the time is creating images to express information, new research, new projects that we do. So we have one of our volunteers here where we were doing, we do mangrove restoration projects. So we had a really cool mural that we had people making on the river at a very popular beach site. So we had not only the mural painting, but then a cleanup and then a little workshop talk about why is it important for us to keep our mangroves clean, as well as why is it important to restore our mangroves, because we have an issue of cutting mangroves for firewood. So, and also for constructing houses, what they'll do now, because we have a lack of space, is they'll cut the mangroves and build houses somehow in the water. So we have a huge issue of protecting our mangroves. So we try to do as much as possible to communicate this information with visual cues for people. Okay, so within our organization, we also try to follow the PCP method. So pre-crisis, crisis response, and post-crisis. So as I said before, our pre-crisis method is offering the capacity building training, creating these campaigns with our citizens, our volunteers, where we have a team of 150 volunteers of various ages, and providing these resources for basic communication and dissemination of information. the crisis response, where we work with our NGO as well as different ones in the country to share information when there is a crisis involved. How best can we avert any other issues moving forward? And as well as post-crisis, if something has happened, how do we provide information that things don't spiral out of control? What type of action can we take within our community against what happens? An example is one of the times we had the fish meal factory. There was like some kind of sludge pouring into the ocean. So we had to like actually come in and help the people in the village, like the volunteers, to like take down the pipe. And they closed the factory, but just for 2-3 days. But you know, similar situations like that where we try to really get involved and support the citizens of the area. So just some photos of our team. This is a part of the riverbank that we try to take care of. And just from one of our active citizenship workshops where we work with the fishing community in Sanyang, which I discussed in the first slide, where they have the fishing crisis. So yeah, so always trying to stay on message, just to make sure that when you are talking about the crisis, that you are focusing on the crisis at hand and not trying to tie in all of these other things. Just try to focus on one thing and keep with the message and repeat the message, because people will not hear you 1,000 times, maybe sometimes not even 1,000,000 times, but just repeat it so they can get the information. Okay, I was like, sorry. Okay, so key takeaways is the reality is within the global majority, crisis and conflict is happening. It's a reality right now. It's not something we are sitting down and thinking of what will we do. We are figuring out solutions on a day-to-day basis. So we have to treat it like a wound. When we see something starting, we try to treat it as early as possible and try to avoid it if it is possible. And try to involve the human elements of honesty, empathy, relatability, and making your message memorable, okay? And yes, I have some information also to say that, like I said, in my personal context, yes, this is the reality. Like, my world is currently on fire. There's violence happening, strikes happening. So this is something that we really need to talk about and think about. So as researchers in this setting, I think it's very important for us to talk about actually taking action, because I have heard the past few days is like, we are researchers and we need to focus on the research. But in fact, if we don't have a world to live in, an ocean to swim in, how can you focus on the research? I mean, it's very easy to be here and in this conference room and say, yeah, I want to focus on my research. We leave the communication to other people. But we're being killed, we're our world's on fire, we don't have time to do this. So I think it's really a civic duty to take action now. Step back from doing the research and be with people and interact with the people, okay? So thank you so much. Be real. Pablo. Stay here.
Many thanks, inspiring talk. I've learned a lot. I'm your fan. So I'm sure that we have some questions.
Thanks a lot for your very inspiring talk. And actually, I have a bit of feeling that you have to clean up things that are not your fault. And I know the situation a bit there. And of course, we all know, I think, that it's because of foreign industrial fishing out of the coast, Chinese, Russian, European as well, that local small-scale fisheries are really running into trouble. And you have to clean it up. That's not a normal way. So that's a shame, actually. And what I think, if you look at, we talk about sustainability and we talk about the ocean decade, and then we think about SDG 14, which is the ocean. But there's much more to be done, because this is also about food. This is about security. This is about gender, because in small-scale fisheries, I don't have to explain you, of course, that there is a role for women there. So this is an extremely good example, case study, of how things can go wrong and where we need to solve the problem. And my question to you is then, is there a way as an NGO or scientist in that local context where you can try at least to talk to the government, who may be in a better position to maybe try to change the things at the source where it all starts and where it's not changing? Is there a way to do that?
Is this recorded? No.
Oh, yes.
Off record or on record? No. Yeah. Is there a way to talk to the government? Yes. Will they listen? Yes. What happens behind closed doors? Who is to say? Like I said, for one of the examples where we had the villagers from Sanyang come in and tell us there was like a sludge coming out, where we personally went and dismantled this pipe, and they said they were shutting the factory down. 2-3 days later, the factory was operating again. So in situations like this, like I said, we had 22 years of dictatorship in my country, and now it's like 4 years into a democracy. You can't know how sick the infrastructure is, who's getting something, whose pockets being filled, whose belly's being filled. So even if you talk to one person and you're all on the same page, everything's fine, you walk away and then you're just like, I thought we were here, and then it's not. So you have a space to exchange with the government. You feel heard, but it's the action that's missing, because you don't know who's. Somebody signing the checks. At a certain point, I will speak for myself personally. It's business. At the end of the day, you know, somebody has a contract with somebody who has allowed it, and it's under wraps, and you don't know about it. So that's the only reason why I think a lot of this is going on. But yeah, I cannot say personally, but this is how I feel. That's why there's no solution. Because if there was, Gambia has one of the most advanced environmental policies in Africa, actually. So it's very strange that we're still having these issues. So something's fishy. Any other questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I really liked your call to action sentence, all hands on deck. I think that applies to all of us. It sounds like a call to action. Is there anything concrete you'd like us to do as ocean communicators? I mean, it's not just your problem, it's our problem too. Do you have any ideas how we could help and maybe rally around stuff more together? Well, that's more like a suggestion. It's, the real question is, what would be your real call to action to us?
Yeah, it can be so many levels, but I think at the end of the day, I believe in humanity and I believe in people connecting with each other. So just starting the conversation with each other. And you know, everybody has a different level of energy and investment that they can make, but just talk to each other and try to do something. That's it. To start. if you want my list, I have a list.
Anything else?
I'm sorry, and thank you. Thanks so much. That was wonderfully insightful. And I apologize because I missed the start, so maybe you mentioned it, but I was wondering what your experience has been about the role of the press and media, about engaging with local media in situations of crisis, whether they're of any help or not, and also about capacity training or training in a lot of those issues, the media, so that they can potentially also do a better job at telling those stories in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you for that question. In terms of experience with the press, we have a lot of journalists in the Gambia. A lot of work. We have like a very large press school, and we work with a lot of Scandinavian organizations to actually develop the capacity for press and media in the Gambia. So we don't lack on having journalists. I think what we lack is the competence in the journalism. Like, I will keep repeating myself because it's something, if it's not your reality, it doesn't click. But when you're living in a dictatorship, there is definitely a mistrust in the media. So we really, on a level of CSO NGOs, really trust each other. So we disseminate information through our WhatsApp groups or through our alliances. We have a GEA, which is like an environmental alliance, where we have meetings for that. So it's really like within our own groups where we share information. On an international scale, it's also complicated because you're only getting one viewpoint, and you're getting the viewpoint of a person that has access to the media that is approved by the powers that be, you know? So there's a lot of like journalism and press and media and communications, but really the ones that I will speak for myself that I personally trust are the ones coming specifically from organizations, but also always taking a grain of salt, especially when it's these situations like crises and conflicts, where if it's a person that's not necessarily trained in being unbiased, where it can become quite tribalistic or, you know, xenophobic. So always taking all of this information with like a grain of salt. So Hope that answers your question. Okay, great.
So we have to move on. It's really interesting. We'll be all day talking to you. So many thanks, Yandeh. And now I'm leaving the floor, our last speaker. Thank you. Our last speaker is a journalist and researcher, oceanographer. It's Pablo Lozano. He works at the Spanish Institute of Oceanography. He will talk us about 2 case studies, especially totally different to this last topic. Thanks, Pablo.
First of all, thank you, Yandeh, for your talk. It was very inspiring and hard, but inspiring. Okay, sorry. And first of all, sorry for my English. My name is Pablo Lozano. I'm an oceanographer and journalist, and I'm the communication officer of the Spanish Institute of Oceanography. In this talk, I will tell you about 2 very different examples of crises of communication related with marine science that we live in 2021. 2 extraordinary mediatic situations which made us to deal with a kind of media which we don't usually do it. First, briefly, I want to introduce the Spanish Institute of Oceanography. That is the main marine science organization in Spain. Currently, we have a staff of more than 700 people, spread over 10 headquarters, territorial headquarters, and also it has 5 experimental aquaculture plants and a fleet of 5 vessels and underwater vehicles. The institution, although it also works in basic science, in everything related to the study of the ocean, its main activity is related to scientific and technological advice to administration, mainly in everything related to the marine environment, marine resources and its protection, but sometimes in other matters that involve the exploration of the seabed, not related to science, as we will see later. This advisory work implies working on issues that often have a big social and therefore media interest, closure of fisheries, ecological catastrophes, etc. But we have never faced before cases as the 2 examples that we suffer in 2021, and I won't tell about. To give you first a first idea with data, I want to show you these statistics. The graph shows in a very general way the volume of work and media attention that we have since 2008. In blue, the number of press releases issued each year, and in yellow, the number of media requests, but only those that were made by writing. Calls are not considered. In 2021, we issued 106 press releases, which is more or less within the average of normal years. But we responded to 437 media requests, practically 4 times the average in normal years. I want also to highlight that in 2022, despite nothing extraordinary happens, we have maintained a very high media interest thanks to our fame acquired in the year before. In April 2021, a mother reported the kidnapping of her two daughters at the hands of her father. And a police investigation began that was extraordinarily mediatic. During several weeks, the case opened all the national news every day, every time. And on May, the Spanish Institute of Oceanography receives a court order to assist the police in the search for these 3 missing people in a marine area at the east of the island of Tenerife. And the organization of the mission was very complex, but finally experts of our institution on board the research vessel Ángeles Alvariño with a side scan sonar and ROV were to the area. And suddenly we found dealing with journalists of mainstream media and tabloids that we had never faced, on occasion, sincerely, with the worst of our journalists. And there was an avalanche of calls, but at the beginning it was easy to deal with. There was an strict secrecy laws, and we couldn't give any information. But the way that some media used to obtain an information was unbelievable. Just one example, one journalist jumped into the restricted area of the port to install hidden microphones in the place of our vessel dock to listen to the conversation of scientists and crew. Yes, it was crazy. And also it was quite shocking, funny sometimes to see in all the national talk shows in prime time talking about bathymetry, side scan sonar, ROVs, and of course with an absolute lack of rigor. And we had an internal debate about whether or not it was appropriate for us to explain some technical details about these exploration techniques. With a spokesperson on television or with a statement, but we decided not to. Although the audience could be huge, we thought that the context and the format was inappropriate to disclose our work. And finally, no statement was made, there was no spokesperson, and no explanation was given, which I think was correct, and it helped to show an image of our institution and the scientists of professionalism. And finally, 20 days after the start of the search, working 24 hours a day, despite the experts thought that it was almost impossible, the scientists found an anchor with 2 sport bags and at a depth of 1,500 meters, one with a body, another broken and empty. And it was a very, very, very sad day, especially for the scientists and the crew on board, and it was very shocking and very traumatic, I think, for the whole country. That day from the press office, we limited to send a very brief statement of condolence that was sent to the family, and of course, it's without a doubt the hardest thing I have ever had to write. Scientists and crew become suddenly the scientists and crew become the heroes of Spain. It was really crazy. Calls from journalists intensified again, and they were trying to find out the names of the scientists and crew by all the ways. They wanted to tell the stories of the heroes with names and surnames. And it was difficult and hard, but the idea was the same, and the decision was to protect our scientists and, from this media and to keep their anonymity. And finally, the day the vessel left, we prepared with the support of our ministry a very extensive press release with an infographic, and we gave all the technical details that we had not given. So the interest in the work of the vessel continued for a long time, and we have a new debate, how to take advantage of the media interest without falling into the sensationalism. And finally, 2 months later, after much negotiation, a team from one of the main national television got on board, coinciding with the end of a survey to study the deep sea habitats in the Mediterranean. And they saw the work of the vessel, and they explained this research project with any mention to the issue of the girls, and with very good results, I think. So, and well, we had a quiet month until on September a volcanic eruption began on the island of La Palma. The emergency committee that managed the volcanic crisis requested the presence of the Spanish Institute of Oceanography to study the effects of the eruption on the marine environment. And well, although the eruption was on land and we were secondary actors, in the 85 days that the eruption lasted, we had to almost 300 requests from the media, more than double that we have in a whole year. We lived before a submarine eruption 10 years ago, but we didn't face an avalanche of requests like that. At first, there was a huge expectation to know what could happen if the lava reached the sea. But most of this interest was in the formation of toxic clouds, something that was generating a lot of alarmism, but we were not for that. Our research was study the effect of the eruption on the marine ecosystems, something that is interesting, but in those moments, a secondary topic. And it was difficult in those first moments to explain what we were doing there. There was a huge disparity in media, most of them generalists and with zero scientific knowledge, and other specialized media that require more detailed information. From the beginning, there was an enormous amount of requests to get on board. It was very tiring to explain how complicated it is. Most of the journalists had a very grown idea of how we work in an oceanographic vessel, but the journalists pressed a lot. They called to us, they called to the ministry, they called to the government delegation. And finally, thanks to the logistic support of the police, we did a visit with 5 people. And we had to choose, made a selection, and it was very hard. We invited both public television, the Canary one and the Spanish one, which was easy to justify, but there was a free place, and we invited a scientific journalist from a private media, and it bothered a lot of colleagues. But at the end, I think, honestly, the information of public television were not the best, and the work of the private media, I think it was fantastic. And I want to show you the piece that they did.
Por esa estrada. Por la derecha de la montaña de Toloque, la que ven con las dos.
Yes, it's in Spanish.
Ramón Magalé,
the police bring the journalist to the boat.
Hola, patrullera de la Guardia Civil, Ramón Magalé, buenos días.
Por favor, para la escalera, ten en cuenta que son 7 personas y con bastante material.
El Instituto Español de Oceanografía acaba de enviar el Ramón Margalef con carácter de urgencia al suroeste
this was
de
before the lava reached the sea.
Determinar si existe algún tipo de abono.
Okay, after this experience with media on board, we decided to be very selective with the organization of new visits. In fact, they were very exceptional. We only accept the request of National Geographic to get on board a photographer during a couple of days in the boat. And after many days of expectation, the lava arrived to the sea, and it was the top of our fame. The volcano decided to reach the sea at midnight, and 30 minutes before, one of the main national channels called me to propose that if someone on board could attend to them, and if we could send them to a video from the vessel. They do a live special, and they did. We posted a tweet at the same moment that the lava reached the water, and it was the most viral in our history. The next morning, the photos we sent to the media were on the front page of the main newspapers in Spain. And this is my favorite impact. The National Geographic photographer, who couldn't have been more lucky, took this amazing photo from the vessel that was on the cover of National Geographic international website, and also was included on a cover story in the paper version. And after that, okay, this only a video of the lava reaching the sea. It's spectacular. And after that, the attention of our work become crazy. And this cover of the most famous satirical magazine in Spain summarized the situation very well. The eruption of scavengers. And everything was news. Every day journalists called to us how deep the lava was, how many degrees the water got hot, and every day we received at least 20 calls asking to get on board. It was really crazy. But despite everything, we had 3 spokespersons on board, and they tried to answer all the requests by phone or video call. They did a huge effort. until it was too much. There was a moment that we realized that most of the media only has interest in the image, and science didn't matter. All the main national television wanted to connect live every day in all their talk shows and news programs, but they didn't care what scientists say. They just wanted to see a scientist with a mask and lava behind him, and many times the questions were stupid. And so we decided to stop attending the media for the rest of the survey. And after this first survey, and after a few days in which we were not present in the area, another of our vessels arrived to continue the study. And on this occasion, due to the huge media interest and the experience of the first survey, we decided that I must be on board and manage the relationship with the media from the vessel. And I think it was much easier for everyone. As I was living with, fun for me. As I was living with the scientists, I knew perfectly the schedules of each one, when they are available or when they are resting, etc. Also, I could record video resources for television myself, and also I could record interviews and with most common question for both radio and television. And I think all of this made scientists' life easier, and they could focus better on their work. Other video of the first underwater image with the ROV. He's covered by ash. Okay, and again, the visits of journalists were very limited, but of course, in this second survey, there were much fewer requests due to the videos that we send almost daily. And there are only 2 visits, very exceptional. Television which got on board, joined with the institutional visit of the science minister, and a production company that casually was filming a documentary for our institution in the framework of the Ocean Decade. And if I have 2 minutes? No? I have a trailer.
Hay más gente que ha pisado
Okay.
la luna que
You
bajado los
can
grandes
look
fosos
for in
oceánicos.
YouTube. And okay, just for finally, as a summary, I wanted to end with some conclusion in form of the express lesson for communication in time of crisis in my experience, in this experience. First one, any context is not valid to disseminate your work, no matter how large the audience could be. Everything communicates, even not communicating. Second, maybe this is very obvious, but it's important. If you have the opportunity to choose the journalist to speak about your work, choose the best one. Time is very expensive in an oceanographic vessel. You are offering a very important and very complex information. And take care of your scientists. They are the protagonists and the image of your institution. Don't push them and protect their image. And above all, this goes to the bosses. Hire communication experts. They are always necessary, but in moments of crisis, they are more. And thanks, everybody.
Ahora el vídeo es en volumen. Thank you, Pablo. We are running out of time, so maybe you have any questions. I lived this with him. He was sitting having a coffee in our lab. It was crazy. Every 30 seconds he had a phone call from a journalist or TV media or something like that. So I think we learned a lot with him, and he did a really good job.
Sorry. I wanted to ask, because of course now the media attention of that case is left. Do you still have good relations with some media contacts or some journalists and so on, that they still buy your research at your institution, or is it something that you came back to your media attention? You said that in 2022 still you have a lot of media requests, so I'm just wondering if that's going to build if that built a long-term relationship, let's say.
Yes, of course. I think many media that didn't know that we exist, now they know, and they are very interested in our work. And as you say, the graph show the media requests that keep very high in 2022.
Okay, another question.
Yeah, thank you, Pablo, for a great presentation. I was just wondering, based on a couple of recent experiences that I will not go into now, I agree completely with you that not all content is equally suitable for communication, or at least not to the mainstream media or the white media. But does that sometimes backfire? Because now media is aware of the service that you can provide, the type of things that you are experts in, and by not communicating about it, while they know, that could bring some bad press. I also have a very nasty recent experience in that respect, so that's why I was wondering whether you have also negative experience with journalist reporting because you're not communicating about something.
Yes, but I think depend of the exact context. For example, when the girl's case, I thought that if they speak bad about ROV or the side scan sonar, it's not matter. Nobody matters, and we didn't win nothing. Explaining how these techniques, I think. Is your question?
Yeah, just
Sorry.
no right answer to the question. I was just wondering about experience. Yeah.
Okay. So many thanks, Pablo.
Okay, thank you.
We are, as I said, it's a bit late, so thank you. And first of all, I have written something because I don't want to forget anything. So first of all, I would like to thank to the local organizers for this fantastic edition of CommOCEAN, and especially to Pierre-François, of course, for all the well-done work, to Station Ifremer for hosting us here in Sète, and to University of Montpellier. I want to thank to all the moderators, the speakers, the people working behind, the coffee breaks, for food reception, for everything. I have received very nice feedback from you, from many of you, and I think I'm really happy about that. So we organize CommOCEAN to connect people, and to connect people that believe that ocean science communication is absolutely necessary. During these 2 days, we have discussed about what we do to communicate, how we do it. I'm sure we will all go back home with our minds plenty of new ideas, with new contacts, and so it's so necessary to meet in person to connect and to create these networks. And in this edition, we've been lucky because we have had among us the master degree students that represent the future of marine science communication. Who knows, maybe one of you will be in charge of organizing a future edition of this conference. Yesterday, we had a fantastic session with them. They asked really tricky questions. We have a really, really interesting debate that made us think about ourselves. Thanks to the people sitting at the back, I'm sure very soon you will be in the front row. Sorry. So, about everything, every talk, every workshop we've been here, we have been attending, has been so interesting. We have the presentation of a marine science document with some recommendations for ocean science communication. We have talked about the decade and the communication of the decade. And these 2 days, we have had the opportunity to hear and discuss about many different topics from citizen science. And it is easier to convince citizens to be involved in citizen science projects than scientists. to marine spatial planning, where they state that it is important not to use scientific jargon and understand how best communicate with different stakeholders, and that communication has to start as soon as possible in marine spatial planning process. Many different tools can be used to spread the word. We have many, many examples of that here, from vessels to art. We have had fantastic examples of how art can communicate and create emotions, via dancing, painting, comics, theater, anything. This morning, Daria was saying in her session that she should be mandatory to include a session on communication of science at every science conference. And I think it's a very good idea, so I'll leave it here for you. What else? We also have had some, sorry again. Some successful experiences on buses were also shared, like shipboard training. I don't know what's happening here, sorry. Yes, sorry? García, that worked. On vessels was also shared, like shipboard training that provides a fantastic, excellent platform for outreach, and for example, the ship-to-shore experience. We also have talked about the use of maps, the European Atlas of the Sea, that make it in a very easy and accessible way, the people to connect with the sea. And also this morning, we've been discussing about online event, the lessons learned. Our lives changed suddenly in 2020, and we had to reinvent ourselves, and we managed to do it, but through the screens. And now we are still, I repeat, I'm here, we are again, and this morning we had a session to talk about that. We have just finished this morning a session, a very interesting one, about making videos. And now we have just finished this with time of crisis. We have also had a session on science and society, where the diverse efforts to bridge the gap between science and scientists and society have been highlighted. Also, again, I don't know why I'm doing this, sorry. It doesn't work properly here. And as you can see, we have had 2 very intense days, many, many ideas to keep on our minds. I have personally learned a lot. Thanks for coming, thanks for your presentations, and especially thanks for spread the word and turn the society eyes to our ocean. I hope to see you all soon in next CommOCEAN 2024. We don't know where, but for sure we'll try to organize it, and we meet there as many of you as possible. Thank you.